Today, we are digging deep into the heart of what supports and challenges a proper safety program. Stay tuned. This is the Safety Wire Podcast. My guest today has been an advocate for safety for years, a veteran of the Royal Navy, and someone that I have a great deal of respect for in our industry. Colin Russell, Flexjet European Safety Director, or as he is known around his mates, the Safety Bloke. Colin, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Tim. Great to be here. Thanks.
It is wonderful to have you on. Thank you for making the time. I know the time change is kind of odd. It's early day for me, and you're getting ready to wrap up your day. But thank you so much for making the time to be on. I would really love to hear, how did you get into aviation? What's your background looking like? And what are you doing these days?
God, how long have we got? Aviation has always been something. From a kid, I remember going to the local airport and going flying in a little private aircraft, a little Piper Archer 2. Taken by some friends, but I traveled around a fair bit as a kid, as an expat, and I just always loved that experience of being in the air. There was something magical about it. So from that, it would always bug me. I remember as a kid sketching planes in my notebooks and school books. Wanted to be an inventor. That clearly I wanted to invented the first flying boat with telescopic wings. That was always the thing that I drew. But ultimately, a combination of a love of aviation and a love of the sea led me to the Royal Navy. So I remember sitting my dad down aged 14, Christmas Day, aged 14, telling me I was joining the Navy, joining the Fleet Air Arm of the Navy as an engineer. And that's where. So I then had a path straight from school, straight into aviation, but as part of the Navy as well, which is to me the best of both worlds.
Outstanding. And how long were you in the Navy at that time?
So I did 19 years. I was lucky enough; they put me through my bachelor's degree, and had some great times on various aircraft types, some time at sea on the aircraft carriers, etc. It was just a really great experience.
Oh, that's outstanding. Well, thank you so much for your service. I got to share a lot of time with the UK folks while I was over in Afghanistan, and couldn't ask for a better group of guys. It was always wonderful. They helped us out. We helped you guys out. It was a great time to be with you guys. And their leaders over there always had, especially in aviation. We worked with a lot of the aviation guys, worked with a lot of the ground guys from the UK, and they had a very great core of leadership, and they were always proud of what they were doing. Talking safety, what would you say the role of leaders in delivering like a safe operation? How are you viewing leaders in the safety world right now?
So it's interesting because I've noticed a difference. Obviously, I did 19 years in the Navy, but then I've done over 11, 12 years now in civil aviation. So having worked as a consultant, having worked with a number of different companies, having then been a safety leader at two large airlines, then into eVTOLs, and now into Flexjet, I've seen a whole number of sectors, and leadership is different in every sector. But the one area that I noticed the difference between the military and civil sector is we train leaders to be leaders in the military. It's very rare that we train leaders to be leaders in the civil world. We tend to promote people based on their professional knowledge, not their leadership and management ability as the core. So you tend to get a lot of people who are very expert in their own opinion, in their own areas, but actually aren't fully versed in the leadership skills that are required. So the role of leaders in a safe operation actually needs to come back to why leaders exist in the first place. What is a leader? Tim, you know me. I love to speak in pub language. I love to bring language down to a way that we're comfortable talking, and a way that we enjoy discussing. So, to put it very simply, leaders have to give a shit about those in their charge. To quote Simon Sinek, leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those people in your charge. And that's a really fundamental mindset shift, that you're there to care for and serve your people. It's servant leadership is another phrase you hear used an awful lot. And those sorts of comments and thoughts really are what brings safety to life. So if you're a safety leader who's interested and places great value in numbers and not people, it's highly unlikely that you'll really know what's happening on a safety front in the business. If you're the kind of person that spends their time as a leader going around and listening to your team and asking how they are, you'll learn a huge amount, and you'll know how safe the business really is, not just what the numbers are telling you. And that's really the fundamental premise of the role of leaders, is to get out there and care. If you clearly give a shit about your team, they will go to the ends of the earth for you, and they'll do it in a safe way.
I 100% agree. And I think too many of our leaders, like you said, are aiming directly towards who's my best mechanic, who's my best pilot. Which ones they need to be looking at, which ones are the ones going above and beyond, as you say, to serve and to care and to guide the other people. Because if you that's not really a skill set that you necessarily learn. That's something you're born with, the ability to care. But when as a leader, when you see those people with the ability to care and the ability to guide, almost as in a parenting instinct, you cultivate that, you grow that, put them through the leadership courses, put them through speaking courses. Because as you said, the language of a leader is much different. And we need to be able to discuss important issues with our groups to where you're not coming across offensive. It's common basic language. We need to be able to discuss things wholeheartedly, man to man at the ground level with the people we're working with. And that's it's a difficult thing to get out of a leader. It truly is, because like we've already said, they're not grown into that position. They're grown into better of the position they're already currently in, and they're not necessarily molded to be in that leadership role. So I do think cultivating that is extremely important. That's a great point that you made.
Yeah, and the other element that comes with that is having the time. So making the time.
Mm-hmm.
So people say safety is my number one priority. Is the phrase that we could discuss that for a whole hour. But people say safety, safety. I'm always about safety, and you say, okay, go and look at your Outlook diary. Go and look at your diary and tell me how much time you've dedicated to safety compared to financial performance, on-time performance, whatever else it might be in your particular sector. Um, yeah, really? You say it's your number one priority, but it's clearly not in the conversations, the daily conversations. But another point, more at a sort of tactical or a working level, there's a difference between walking up to someone who's working. It doesn't matter what task, what industry you're in. You imagine walking up to someone who's working and saying, "Hi, what are you doing?" Nothing. I'm doing my job. It's a very task focused question. So you walk up to someone and say, "How are you doing?" Not quite Joey from Friends, "How you doing?" but "How are you doing?" If you ask how someone is, how's life, how are you getting on, how's work around here, if you're taking interest in them as an individual, they will repay that tenfold in telling you about not only how they are, but how it is to work in that environment. If you ask them what they're doing, you'll get very little back from them. So that's a key measure. Are you walking around saying, what are you doing, what are you doing, or are you going, how are you doing, are you okay, are you happy, what's going, there's been a change coming down the road, are you happy with why that's being made, that decision has been made? That's a wholly different way of engaging people, and that's the fundamental role of leaders in a safe operation.
Mm-hmm. And I think you and I probably both were raised in the military the same way, where morale is a very important virtue to have in your team, and that taking interest in the people around you and their home lives and what they're going through. And I think when you do that, it's going to have two great outcomes. First, you're going to boost the morale, better output of work. And the second thing is, if you understand what your employees are going through, I think you can mitigate a ton of human factors issues. Because if you know that one of your employees, their dog died last week and they got presented with divorce papers this morning, is that going to be your best mechanic on the floor? Is that going to be your most in-depth pilot while he's flying? Probably not. And taking an understanding and an appreciation for the things that your folks are going through is extremely important in any leadership role. Now,
And that's exactly it,
go ahead,
because
Con.
it's
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
people. Sorry, it's your people that deliver a
Mm-hmm.
safe operation. Processes don't deliver safety. It's people that
Nope.
deliver a safe operation. The processes help for sure. Processes are important. But if your people, as you say, are there, the human factors and the chance they have of following that process and getting that process right every time significantly reduces if you don't care for them. If you don't look and care and support them so they can get the job right every time, then it doesn't matter how much process. And that is when the manuals start to get thicker and thicker and thicker. Because if you think that the process is giving you safety and not the people, you will write more and more and more and more process. Your manuals will get really thick, and that creates the illusion of safety. Because
Mm-hmm.
actually, when you turn your back, no one's paying attention to the manual. So you think you have all this stuff, and you think, hey, look at me, I've got a massive, great load of procedures. Everything is down and documented and proceduralized. You're kidding yourself, because the people
Mm-hmm.
simply will not follow that amount of procedure. It's not our human nature. We're not robots. We are humans. We think, we care. We have shit days. When, do you know what?
Yeah.
Life's in our own mind, in our own world, life is really tough. We have other days when we see life being tough for someone else. We go over, we care for them. That's how leaders at every level. Leadership is not just a top-down effect. You can have leaders at every single level. You should have leaders at every single level in the business, and you do whether you know it or not. You'll have the guy who
Mhm.
sits, in the crew room or in the canteen, and the others who he works with will listen to him. When he starts talking, everyone else stops talking. You'll know who they are. They're your informal leaders, and actually, they have a vital role to play in delivering a safe operation because they're the people you should be listening to.
Exactly. Yeah, I've always thought the best SMS program is the thinnest one because, as you said, it's not the program that's running it; it's the people involved in it. And if they have their buy-in, and it's a culture, and it's one, And we've tossed around a lot of words already. We've tossed around SMS and human factors and culture, and morale, and all these things. You have a great opinion on the language of safety and how that can come back to bite us. Can you dig into that a little bit since we're using a lot of the safety jargon? I mean, in aviation alone, we have acronyms that they've literally written books to discuss our acronyms. So, tell me your opinion on the language of safety and how we're heading right now.
Yeah, it's something that bugs me, to be honest. I,
Okay.
I don't like jargon. I find that it makes people make assumptions, but it also switches people off. It doesn't matter which sector you're in. If you're talking to your peers in your particular sector, you'll use a jargon that's naturally developed, and that's because we like to talk easily and communicate easily, and we're lazy as humans. So we'll always find jargon. The problem is when you're trying to talk between one group and another group. That's when it breaks down. I'll give you a great example. I was standing on the ramp underneath it was a Boeing 777, and I was working with a ground handling company, and I watched them do a 5 minute safety talk before they were doing some training, etc. They did a 5 minute safety talk, and I thought, great, this is going to be amazing. And the safety guy came out there and he said, "Hi, as part of our safety management system, we need to discuss the difference between hazards, threats, and the ways we can mitigate these risks involved in the ground operation." And I knew exactly what he meant. But I looked at the people that were standing there, and their eyes had gone, they glazed over. They had no interest. These are guys who are out there in the shittiest of conditions, snow, in the hottest of conditions, and bright in heat and everything else, throwing bags around, driving heavy machinery, etc. They don't need to know the definition of a hazard, a risk, a threat, etc. They need to know what's going to bite them in the ass and what's the most important thing to do to protect themselves from getting bitten in the ass. When I used that language with them 10 minutes later, they said, "Guys, what's going to bite you in the ass today on this job?" "Oh, bloody hell, you haven't seen this bit. Have you come and have a look at this? The belt's worn out on this thing." "Ah, now we're talking my language." The safety guy, he was talking as if he was talking to other safety experts, safety professionals. And actually, we're doing ourselves a disservice as safety professionals by trying to talk in our own language. Yeah, it's to to take it to another level. It's that men are from Mars, women are from Venus. You have to understand that you're talking to different tribes, different mindsets. You have to get into their language. Yeah, and that might be an age difference. It might be a sector difference. It might be different cultural bodies. There's always differences. But if you go as a safety person and try and talk safety in very sort of jargon heavy language, doesn't matter who your audience is, you're going to have to work so much harder just to get a relationship with them. So the guys at Flexjet, they're always joking, "Oh God, here comes Colin. Hey Colin, what's going to bite us in the ass today?" But it's a phrase that I use an awful lot because it relates and everyone knows exactly what I mean. It doesn't matter whether I'm talking any part of the business. When I say what's going to bite us in the ass and what are we doing about it, I haven't used the word risk, hazard, threat, etc. The differences. What are we doing to stop us getting bitten in the ass? What's the chance of this going badly wrong? you know when you talk in that kind of language, it just opens people up. And I'm seeing that, the number of reports, the style of the reports that are being written for us, the style's changing. People are being more informal but therefore more communicative in their language. So I'm also unfortunately, as you say, with a military background and everything else, I am, and a sailor in particular, my language is pretty filthy. I swear with the best of them, and you'll see some of that as we talk. But even EASA recognized it when they gave me the hashtag potty mouth. It was my strap line for an article I wrote for them. So it's recognized. It's something that, but it's pub language. The acid test for me is if you're sitting with some people, and you were to talk with your mates in a pub or a bar the way you talk to people about safety. How many of your mates would still be sitting there after 2 minutes? Or would they've all found an excuse to go to the toilet, go to the bar, etc., because you're boring the shit out of them because they can't even understand what it is you're saying. That to me is the
Exactly.
asset. If I'm sitting there with professionals and I'm talking safety, but I'm talking and they're sitting and they're interested and they're sitting forward, and I'm thinking, this is the way my mates would be in a bar or pub, then perhaps I've got it right. So safety in pub language is something that I like to do. Either that or I just like to swear. One of the two.
I'm pretty sure it's the latter, but we'll go with the first part of that, and especially if you got a beer in your hand. From my experience, I will never knock anybody from having a degree from a university because I think that is a great tool to use in safety. But if you cannot bring yourself to your common audience and you cannot use, as you said, common language and be able to hold those conversations with everybody, then you're never going to progress yourself to a leader. You're going to write some great SOPs. You're going to write some great procedures because that's where your college knowledge comes in. But especially for those of us, and I grew up on the hangar floor, but for those in this role who did not start on the hangar floor, getting your hands dirty and working hand in hand with those people, it's going to be very difficult to progress into a leadership role because you're not going to have that respect factor. I remember I had an auditor one time. He would go out on the hangar floor to do a safety or quality audit in a 3-piece suit with a fedora on, like pristine clothing, and he'd come back and complain and go, nobody's talking to me. Nobody's telling me about the hazards. I'm like, you look like a narcotics officer. Of course not. Nobody's going to come up and discuss that with you. You look like you're about to write them up for everything. Get in the t-shirt and your coveralls and get out on the floor. Make sure you understand the environment that you're in. There's a time and place for non-pub language, as you would say. But not on the hangar floor and on the ramp with these guys, that's not the place. You need to be able to talk commonly with them.
As a safety professional, you've got to be able to mirror whoever it is you're talking with. Yeah.
Exactly.
I use an analogy. In the Navy, the chaplain has no rank. They're known as the bish on board. They have no rank because they wear whatever rank the person is that holds that they're talking to. So if they're talking with an admiral, the chaplain's an admiral for that conversation. If they're talking to a young sailor, they're also a young sailor. They mirror. And it's a great analogy for exactly what a safety professional needs to be able to do. I did this when I was consulting and going and visiting different organizations and assessing safety culture. We learned this from feedback. We went to one company and they used to say, "Oh, here come the suits," because we used to dress up smartly, thinking that's what our clients wanted. Well, that might be what the CEO wanted, but it meant that when we got to the shop floor, just like you were saying, they wouldn't talk to us. So I remember going around with some of their guys and saying, "Look, is there somewhere I can ditch my jacket and tie?" Because I'd just come out of a meeting with the management team, so I was suit and tie. But I said, "I need to ditch my tie and my suit," and they're like, "And my suit jacket." Like, "What do you mean?" I said, "I need to put it somewhere." Took off my tie, rolled my sleeves up, walked around, grabbed my notebook, and walked out onto the hangar floor with an open neck shirt, sleeves rolled up. I couldn't quite get the overalls on, but when I went and sat with people, they were like, "Yeah, you can talk," because the tie is the biggest weapon. It's to distinguish us. It separates us. Well, as a safety professional, that's the last thing you want it to be separated from whoever it is you're talking to. So you're absolutely right. The language, the way we communicate, the tone with which the non-verbal communication, safety professionals standing like this, yeah, that's never going to engender people to say, "Hey, come on, let's talk." So the non-verbal language of safety is just as important as the language of safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for those of you who are in a safety role, especially those upcoming, Colin nailed it. Don't cross your arms. Do not walk around with a clipboard because that's instantly don't come talk to me. And don't take 1,000 pictures. If you're doing an audit and you need a few pictures, that's fine. But don't sit there and videotape the whole hangar. You're going to really put people off. But it can be a challenge to pivot those roles because in the morning I might be doing an audit in the hangar, but in the afternoon I might also be doing a presentation for some leadership of why we need funding for a certain thing, and you need to be able to pivot that. And I use the word challenge because that's one in your briefcase that I absolutely love that you use. I rarely hear people say it, and every time I've heard you speak, you immediately jump into that. Let's challenge this. Let's push this. And I would imagine it pisses a lot of people off over time, which is perfectly fine because you're supposed to do that in safety. But when you say, let's challenge that and let's push that, unbox that for me. Tell me what you're meaning by that.
So complacency is one of the biggest risks we have. We think we're great. Aviation's a great example. Our safety record is second to none. We're doing amazingly. We get complacent. We don't think it's going to bite us in the ass. The challenge to that, though, to use the phrase, is the way to overcome complacency is to question and challenge yourselves. Yeah, not question and challenge people, because that's when the barriers go up, the shields go up. Don't you question me? Who are you to question me? You don't know my job, etc. Can I challenge that point? Means I'd like to unpack and discuss that point with you. I might be wrong. But or I wonder if there might be another way of doing this. But being that conscience, being that anti-complacency person is a great role for a safety professional, to be the anti-complacency person. And so it ended up when I was at Flybe, they used to say, "Hey, can we do a Colin on this and just question it, or can we challenge this? Let's do a Colin." And just stop and catch them, because what happens in a lot, in particularly in meetings, is you tend to get this, yeah, 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 keep going, and you're rolling through, and someone says, "Can we just stop and just question that bit?" Suddenly, everyone goes, "Oh, yeah," and if you're doing it in the right way, you're challenging the point, the fact, the assumption. Everyone engages with it. If you said, "Hey, Tim, can I just challenge you on this?" You're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, no, no, come on, that's pretty unfair." If I say, "Tim, you made a really interesting point there. Do you mind if I just challenge that point?" It's a different conversation, and everyone opens up, and it warms. And that's the learning. This whole concept of challenging and questioning actually came out from a public inquiry into the loss of a British, they call it a spy plane, a Nimrod aircraft that blew up over Afghanistan. And actually, it was an accident. It wasn't enemy fire. It was an accident, but it had actually been about 25 years in the making, with the air-to-air refueling system they fitted and kept and modified and learned. But it kept on going and going, and the whole organization and leadership and culture and everything was incorporated in it. But actually, they took some of the sort of safety models and added a questioning culture. If you take Reason's model of safety culture, where you have your just reporting, it had a learning culture in there as well, flexible, uh, and then they added this questioning culture in there, which I thought was great, because that's the if you have a culture where people are happy to question, happy to challenge, not just to piss people off, but to make sure that you're stopping and thinking, you're catching the assumptions, you're looking for practical drift. Have we drifted too far here? Is a great question. If you know the models of practical drift, etc. If you talk about the box of standards or different models, are we inside or outside the box? Are we doing the right thing? Is this what the company wants us to be doing? Do we just need to take 5 seconds here to discuss this before we do it? Those are all great questions. And having that mindset of, can we just, and rewarding people who do it the right way and role modeling it is a really great behavior. So that's why I do it. I'm trying to role model a questioning and challenging culture in a positive way, not a negative, let's not do this, we can't do this, oh, we're all doomed kind of stuff, but a positive way of just checking. So that's where it comes from, and it seems to work.
Absolutely. Well, and it works so well because not only does it educate those challenging your points, it also educates yourself because, at least for me, I learn so much more and I feel more confident in the information I'm presenting if I have to re-explain it and re-explain it from a different angle. And, on a speaking engagement, maybe I glossed over a bullet point that I've said 1,000 times and it's just common knowledge to me, but that person didn't understand it. And me discussing through it, oh, that's a completely different perspective for me. And those challenges open up some great conversations to dive deep into the processes, procedures, and the issues we're facing.
That's exactly it. You're opening up. And by asking
Mm-hmm.
questions and challenging, you open up a conversation, you avoid assumptions and all the biases that people, I mean, we have hundreds of biases that we're all exposed to, either as a group or individually. And just by asking and thinking and challenging together, you can at least identify those biases. They might be fine. Or they might be
Mm-hmm.
actually that little link in the chain that snapped that's going to lead the whole thing to fall apart. So yeah, it seems to work really well.
Exactly. And you mentioned culture. Are you seeing this questioning culture? Because I know that James Reason's culture, just flexible uh, reporting and the common five that we use. But are you
Yeah.
seeing the questioning culture appear a little bit more?
I am. And it came from Charles Haddon Cave, as the was the Queen's Counsel, now King's Counsel, who followed that up, who developed that phrase, that questioning culture, having spoken to an awful lot of people, and it's something that's permeating in some areas, in others it's not. It depends on where people think, where they learn from. Um, but it also depends on the broader thing. So safety culture is a really interesting one, because people assume this culture is this homogenous thing in an organization. And cultures, it's a word that's almost misused or misinterpreted or overused. Um, to me, it's cultures ebb and flow, and it's almost intangible to get your hands around. And there are ways of measuring and assessing a culture against a framework, etc. I've done it. I mean, I did it for years. But what it helped me understand is actually it's not about the culture; it's about the mindset. Culture is something about them, they, the organization, the business has a culture. Well, that's not it. We're individuals. Every human is an individual. And if you ask what the mindset is, it induces a more individual focused question. So, what's our safety culture like, as opposed to what is the mindset of people when it comes to safety? Very different question you've just asked. Now, people might say it's the same thing, but it tends to lead back to these biases and questioning and challenging and all this sort of stuff. It tends to lead you down a slightly different path. If you say, what's the mindset, or what was the mindset? What was in that person's mind when something happened, or when they made that decision, more importantly, when they behaved a certain way? If you think that, rather than saying our safety culture, it's just too homogenous. We don't work. We work in we trust people. We don't trust people in an organization. You don't trust an organization because it's not an evolved thing that we know as humans. What we do trust are people in teams, but the best word for it is tribes. You will naturally trust people in your tribe. Yeah, that's the way we've evolved for thousands of years. You trust the people in your tribe. You don't trust people from other tribes. That's the key, one of the key differentiators. So who's in your tribe? If you have a tribe, let's say engineers, technicians, yeah, and pilots, they could be one tribe together and you trust each other implicitly. Or they could be two separate tribes and you don't trust each other. And the way people act and behave will be intimately linked to that tribal approach. Who's in your tribe? And if they're not in your tribe, you've got to find ways to help develop and engender that trust. And that is ultimately what a safety mindset is, and that's how the safety culture. So you can see how they are interlinked, and they're words that people tend to use interchangeably. But to me, and I probably use them incorrectly. There'll be some academics out there who probably pick me apart, but it's based on what I'm learning and experiencing out there, in the real world. But so that's where the safety culture bit. We overuse the phrase safety culture, and I think if we
Hmm.
start to think about tribes and mindsets, it just finds it. I don't know. It works for me. It finds an easier way to try and understand what the challenges might be.
Yeah, I agree with you there that we definitely overuse culture, and I think synonymously with that we overuse human factors as well. And it's such an old phrase and the dirty dozen, and it's less about the mindset. Because you can only break down root cause so far. I've actually very rarely found the ability to actually hit true root cause. You can continue asking why. You can go all the way into what the guy had for breakfast that morning. And unless you get into the mindset of that, you do, once again, back to communication, back to language, back to culture, a human to human conversation. What were you thinking in that moment? Most major issues come down to a small little decision that was a fleeting thought at the time. And you'll never get into that mindset unless you go over pretty much everything we've discussed today and get into the mindset of that human to human culture. I love that. Speaking of culture, which also has a lot of trust involved in it and mindset, and you mentioned tribes, and I'm jotting down more notes than I've ever done during a podcast. So I'm hoping my mind's right for all these questions.
Yeah.
Trust comes to mind quite a bit. Let's get your opinion because and this will feed into, we're going to do a little section at the end called questions for Colin. We're going to probably do a follow-up episode to this one because hopefully some people get some pushback or at least some good conversation with this. Are we placing too much trust in SMS? What's your opinion on that? Why do we have it? Is it failing? Is it an old topic? What do you think?
So SMS is interesting. I hear people say we have an SMS, and I say, well, great, show me, and they open up their laptop. Now I'm starting to get a little twitched. What is an SMS? What is a safety management system? And it's a tool. A safety management system is a series of policies, processes, procedures, information, etc. It's a tool or a series of tools. Having an SMS does not make you safe. Using an SMS really well and learning from the outcomes of it and focusing your time, your effort, your investments, your finances, etc., your resources to keep on making you safer is what safety is. So there's a difference between having an SMS and using the outputs of an SMS to help you improve your business. Very different things. Everyone says we have an SMS. Why do they say that? Because that's what the requirement is. The requirement is to have an SMS. Depending on which part of aviation you work in, depending on which part of the world you're in, there's various maturing levels of having an SMS. But it's why, it's the intent. And that's the bit we've lost. We've lost the why. Why do we have to have an SMS? Because the regulator told us? Because it looks good on our internet site? Or because we want to learn and understand what's going to bite us in the ass and not get bitten in the ass if we can possibly avoid it? There's the challenge. And those who think we have to have an SMS just because the regulator tells us is missing the point of why the regulation was written. Those who have it because they think it looks good on their internet site, perhaps it's helping them win business because everyone expects you to have an SMS. And it's a differentiator for those who aren't required to have it. But that's not the reason why you have one. You have one, so to take the words of the people that first came up with the concept in ICAO, etc., was so you know where to best spend your money. To be very blunt about it, an SMS helps you understand what is going to most likely bite you in the ass and how bad it might be, so you can go and do some shit about it. And by doing shit, I mean spending money, training people, working with whatever mitigations, controls, jargon, whatever shit you want to do to stop it from happening again. That's the fundamental purpose. And everything in an SMS is built around that. So that's where we have an SMS in some parts. We use SMS tools to help us manage and stay safe and get even safer in some places. And in other places, we have an SMS and we trust it. Therefore, we place too much trust in it just because we have one. That's the fundamental challenge of it all. Do we actually know the value we're getting from our SMS, or do we just have one because that's what we're expected to have? And the acid test is to ask the non-safety professionals, what is an SMS and why do we have one? And listen to their answer. Go and ask the CEO or the CFO or the chief commercial officer or the managing director and say, why have we got an SMS? And see whether they actually recognize the intent of the outcome of an SMS or what. Well, I wonder what their answer is. Let's not prejudge it. I wonder what the answer would be.
I agree. And, I think too many companies believe, as you said, it's where do you put your money? Too many companies believe that it should be safety at all costs, or just if it looks dangerous, we put our money there. I've had the question quite often, why don't we have more AEDs in our facilities? Well, what's the risk of that? In the past 10 years, how many cardiac events that would be preventable or have a better outcome having an AED on the wall have we had? Well, I don't know. Well, did you do a risk assessment on it? Did you do anything, any SRA, anything to point you in the direction? Because that's how a proactive SMS program should work, is you actually assess the risks and the hazards and the barriers in your organization. And that's where you put your focus. But if you just say, hey, this wall is empty, most empty walls have an AED on them. Let's get one. Well, okay. Well, they're about $6,000 a piece and they, cost money over time. Is that a good investment for a young workforce that has not shown any cardiac history, or is a bigger risk fall protection because we're on top of an aircraft 24 hours a day? Okay, so where do you put your money? It cannot be safety at all costs. And the companies that do that will not have a safety program for long because they'll bankrupt themselves. They're going to put tons of money into things that do not work, that do not matter. And because their SMS program, they spent $60,000 on it and it's just a binder that sits on a shelf versus a free SMS, just using common sense, points them in a different direction.
And that's exactly it. The best SMS can be 3 sides of paper and a notebook. That's it. That's all you need. 3 sides of paper, and you can build a compliant SMS with that, and just a paper notebook. Something like this. That could be my SMS.
Mm-hmm. It really does not take much.
Mm-hmm. Or you can spend tens of thousands of dollars or pounds on complex software that really analyzes, etc. You got to find, it's horses for courses, to use the phrase, but it's knowing why you're doing it and what good is it doing for you as a business. If it's helping you manage the shit that's going to bite you in the ass and giving you confidence that you're actually managing it well, so it's the likelihood of it biting you in the ass is reduced, Your quid's in. That's how it is. So being able to use this kind of language, being able to use this understanding and explain to people, when you go and ask for finances from the CFO and he says, "Well, why do you need this money?" You go, "Well, yeah, no, we think it's a good investment." Okay, why is that? Well, we yeah, it was a good idea. We asked for the guys for some ideas, and it was a good idea. Or you turn around and say, "We've done an assessment, and actually we've had 16 safety reports that said that lighting was a contributing factor to the errors we're making on maintenance in the aircraft. Here's the 16 reports, by the way, and you can see how lighting was a contributing factor. I'll come back to root cause contributing factor, but lighting was clearly a factor in these 16 events. Those 16 events cost us about 2 million in rework. You're going to get new lighting for your hangar." Yeah, rather than the guys in the crew were saying the lighting shit. And therein is the how you can use it to your advantage, because it's helping you understand why. Just to come back to that root cause contributing factor bit, I totally agree. There is no single root cause, and you can keep asking why until you end up saying, well, it's why because the primary education system was a challenge. The, More likely, it's there are a number of things that influenced that event happening, the likelihood of that event or the severity of that event. It's a bit like when you're weeding in your garden. When you pull out the weed, unless you are a particular type of gardener, I've never seen a plant come out with a single clean root. I don't think it exists. When you pull it out, it comes out like a bag of shit. There's mud, there's weeds, there's probably a couple of worms in there. There's a whole bunch of shit when you pull out that weed. Yeah, that is the reality of life. Yeah, and being able to say these few things contributed to it. You never get the idea of a single root cause. I don't mind the methodology, the mindset to ask why, etc. But if it drives you to be too process driven to thinking I must have root cause, what is root cause? You miss the richness of all the little things that influenced it. So to me, when I'm doing a learn, we call them learning reviews. We don't call them investigations. We say because the intent is not to investigate somebody, but to learn and from the event. So it's a learning review. So when we're doing learning reviews, if I haven't got 6 or 7 contributory factors at least in there, then I've failed. I haven't asked and gone wide enough and understood and with a rich enough picture what happened in the lead up to that event. So I look at it as I'm going through and writing these up, and I'm going right when I do the classification at the end, not at the beginning, but when I do the classification and code the contributory factors at the end, and I've only got a couple, I'll go back and start again because I've clearly missed the richness. If I've got loads, then I know that I'm listening. I'm picking lots of different things up. So it's a fascinating thing that it links back into this SMS. Are we over capitalizing, or are we over depending on the fact that we have an SMS? We place too much trust in the system, the process, without asking ourselves or understanding why we got it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. If your SMS doesn't dig out, like you're saying, into the contributing factors, because I've always thought 10 contributing factors is way better than a single root cause. You're going to learn so much more about the entire space that this incident is taking place in, or this hazard's taking place in. And every SMS program is the same way of garbage in, garbage out, great things in, great things out. If you're filling it with great data and good analysis of every hazard and incident coming through, you're going to get some great things out of it. But once again, as we said, if it's a binder that sits on the shelf and you just say, aircraft hit wingtip because of X, Y, and Z. You don't have enough data in there of why. What were the lighting conditions? What were the weather conditions? Did we have enough wing walkers? Did we have the right tug driver? Are they a licensed tug driver? So many other questions you could be asking. And if you're not properly putting the data into that system, you're only going to get garbage out of it to begin with.
Exactly it, and that's one of the other challenges for safety professionals is how to learn from the data. I'm not a data expert. I never will claim to be. Put me in front of an Excel spreadsheet and I start to struggle a bit. It's not my forte. But I know that I need that skill, particularly the size and the scale, and where we start talking flight data monitoring or hums if you're in the helicopter world, etc. You've got to have the ability to rip that data apart. So it's a skill set that actually we need to develop within the safety world. Either we need to develop it or we need to bring it in. Having people who can really analyze and rip data apart, look for causations and correlations between data points you probably wouldn't think of, back to contributory factors. Time of day. Is time of day a contributory factor to events? I don't know. But I'd love to be able to map every single event we've had in the different buckets against time of day. Because if it is a particular time of day that's biting us in the ass in something, Well, there's a great bit I can go and do, and I can start to put some time and money looking into time of day issues because it'll bite us in the ass in different little places, but the contributory factor is the same. And this is about what we mean about that richness of data. Um, and it comes back to that questioning and challenging nature. What is it that's contributing to these events? Why are we seeing an interrelationship between time of day and the events we're seeing? Those questioning mindset. It's right. You can question the data, and that's the bit. Again, we're not very good at asking questions. A good example is KPIs. We set ourselves KPIs. Why? Because we want to set ourselves targets. Why? Because we want to measure. You can't manage what you can't measure. Read the full quote, which says something you waste your time trying to do it, and it can actually harm you by trying to measure stuff. But why do we set these indicators, and are they any good? Well, an indicator is a measure of a particular trend. What's the question you're trying to answer with that indicator? Reporting, number of reports per month. What question are you trying to answer with that indicator? Because if you don't know what the question is, how do you know what happens when the number varies? So it was going up and now it's going down. Good or bad? I don't know. I don't know based on that single piece of information, that single indicator you're using to look at reports. You
Mm-hmm.
know, number of findings
What are
going
you
up or down. Is that
contrasting
a
it
good thing
with?
or a bad thing?
Mm-hmm.
It's contrasting it with, it's adding a number of indicators together, but it's leading back to the question. So I set myself a question. We have a question, which is, how effectively are we managing compliance with the regulations? Now I can go and choose 2 or 3 indicators, and that's the question I put up in our review boards. The question at the top is, how effectively are we managing compliance? Another question is, how much how well do our teams trust us and tell us what's going on? Now, that's a great question, because if they don't trust you and they don't tell you what's going on, then all the rest of the safety work you're doing is pretty theoretical, because you don't actually know what's going on in your operation. So that question, yeah, is a great question, because you can then set indicators. So I've got 3 or 4 indicators I use then to understand, what type of reports. Are they telling us once it's gone wrong, or are they telling us before it goes wrong? Are they reporting themselves, or are they reporting other people or things? Those are all healthy indicators to tell us whether they trust us and they believe they're going to be treated fairly. So it doesn't matter which bit of your safety world you're looking at. If you set yourself a question and then look at the indicators, or if you've got indicators, ask yourself, what is the question I'm trying to answer with these indicators? Because it completely changes the review process, the review meetings we all have to have. We have to have our safety review boards, etc. And if you sit there, I went to one company when I was consulting, and they had a 140-page agenda with graphs. They had so many KPIs. It was amazing to look at the amount of data and the amount of time it took to generate those graphs every single quarter. But I sat in the meeting, and not one question was asked, and not one decision was made. So they reviewed the data, but they didn't learn, and they didn't challenge, and they didn't act based on the data presented to them. It was fascinating to watch. They claimed they had a world-leading SMS. And that questioning, if you think you're world-leading, you're probably not. James Reason, the father of human factors, he said, if you think you've got it licked, you most certainly haven't. And that's come back to this questioning. Question yourselves as safety professionals. What else? Where am I going? How can I improve? Because trust me, if you think you've got safety licked, it's about to bite you in the ass big time.
Exactly. Continuous improvement is one of the, in my opinion, continuous improvement is the cornerstone of a proper safety management system, any safety program. If you're not looking within first, you're never going to get great product coming out. And I think you and I are both the same way, where questioning ourselves and challenging ourselves, as you would say, is the best way to learn. And that's what I want to wrap us up with. I want challenged. I want Colin, especially Colin challenged. I want to know, is Colin full of it? Let us know. So I would love to see some questions come in and pick apart what we've been discussing today. Maybe you and I are both full of crap, and by the end of this episode, we're probably going to be out of a job. So this will be, career suicide at this point. But challenge us, question us. I want to open the floor to questions. And Colin, I want you back on another episode where we can actually dive deep into some of these questions if you're willing to do so.
No, I'll be delighted. Tim, I love chatting with you. It's great. We think in a way that challenges each other. We discuss things, but we're not scared of saying, "Oh, I wonder if you're wrong." Or, what about this? Is there a different perspective? So it's not just I love chatting to you because we always agree. That's the best thing, is that we don't always agree. That we have different ways of thinking and talking. And one of the interesting things for me is the differences and the similarities we have. We come from similar backgrounds, military, etc., but we come from different sides of the pond, different cultures, different tribes. But we still find a way of bonding and building, and now we're part of the same tribe, which is amazing. So, Tim, loved it. Absolutely brilliant chat. For those of you listening, please do a question. Let's try this. Let's try this shit. Let's see if Colin's full of shit. Come on. I've got a potty mouth. But let's, seriously, if you got a question or an observation, you want to tell us that we're wrong, you want to tell us that you've seen something that breaks what I've been saying or what Tim and I have been saying, I'd love to hear it, because I might be wrong. I might not be going down the right path. You might have seen something that absolutely takes my feet out from underneath me. So please, I look forward to seeing the challenges and the questions. Tim, you and I will always talk, my friend. So yeah, we'll get in there, and I look forward to doing this again.
Outstanding. Yep. I want the challenges. I want the questions, because I do not want to spend the next 30 years of my career being wrong about something. And I think pushback and questioning that's some of the best drivers to really cultivate a great culture and a great personal mindset of safety. So, Colin, thank you for all of your amazing wisdom. Like I said, I usually don't write that many notes during a podcast, and I filled up 2 pages while we were doing this one. So we definitely have enough criteria right here for a whole nother episode. But thank you for everybody who's watching. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere you can get your podcast.